From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We're joined, as always, with our super producer, Andrew, the Triforce Howard. Most importantly, you are you. You are here. That makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. And, of course, it's the top of the week. So if you are hearing this strange news the evening it publishes, let us be the first to welcome you to May 26th. Also, free El Gato.
The cat?
Yeah, free El Gato. Let our man go. This is.
I don't think I know about it. Who's the cat? Why we got to let him go?
Get this. Over in Costa Rica, we always like to start with something that's not immediately terrible. Over in Costa Rica, prison officials have caught a cat smuggling drugs into the facility. An officer at the
naughty boy,
at the Pocoche prison in northeastern Costa Rica spotted the cat and was like, "Hey, what's this cat doing in lockup? And why does he have a cute little saddlebag?
A little pouch?" Yeah. We heard about that with pigeons, I think, once before. There was something, too, about like illegal cell phones being smuggled into prisons attached to little pigeon feet. That's wild. Industrious. I respect that.
We want to give a shout out to our friends at AP News who we're recording this on Wednesday, May 21st. On May 19th, AP News showed just what is an adorable cat, clearly rocking significant weight for a cat. They gave this poor guy a backpack of drugs. He got caught. Free El Gato. He's just caught up in the system. That's our first strange news story. Mm-hmm. We're also going to get to other stuff. This entire show is not going to be about El Gato, though free the cat. We're going to learn about a birdpocalypse. We're going to catch up on some unpleasant news related to the accuser of Prince Andrew. We're going to talk about some deep stuff. Be warned, this program will contain descriptions of self-harm. This may also touch on the idea of assisted suicide. Before we do any of that, what say we take a break and come back and discuss reality shows?
Mm-hmm. Or maybe just reality.
Yeah. We've returned. At this point, I think everybody in the U.S. has heard the news, the scuttlebutt, the rumors about the idea of the federal government starting a reality show pitting contestants against one another in hopes of getting their applications for legal status fast-tracked.
Yuck.
Yeah, gross. Hunger Games.
Yeah, Hunger Games. Every time I look at the comments about this, you can't not see people referencing the Hunger Games. And I did see actually that this was done before, I want to say, in Mexico. And it was mega unpopular and frowned upon then.
And Matt, is this familiar to you as well?
This is not familiar to me at all.
Well, we'll give you the roller coaster version very quickly, since we have a lot of stories to get to. The most recent announcement regarding this, there's a history to it, okay? A while back, there was a piece run in the Daily Mail, and in that piece, it also went to Wall Street Journal, there were these signals from the U.S. government that they were considering creating a reality show in which immigrants in the U.S. compete for citizenship, compete to get their paperwork, what we will call fast-tracked. Most recently, the current Homeland Security Secretary, Kristi Noem, spoke to the Senate just yesterday as we record, and she said, look, we have no knowledge of this reality show idea. We have no idea why this has been reported. Her specific comment to the Senate's Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee was the following, quote, "There may have been something submitted somewhere along the line because there are proposals pitched to the department, but me and my executive team had no knowledge of the reality show." She added, "There are no plans whatsoever to do a reality show. However, you guys, if you go back to May 16th, Homeland Security spokeswoman Tricia McLaughlin said on multiple occasions some weird stuff. She told the Wall Street Journal earlier that the department was considering collaborating on a TV show of exactly this nature. And get this, guys, deep cut. The pitch came from the same producers who made Duck Dynasty.
Classic television.
Yeah. High level
Wonder-
policy.
Duck Dynasty.
What?
Yeah, they got a podcast too.
What is the connection between Duck Dynasty and people wanting to have status as an American citizen?
Yeah.
I mean, it is a pretty right-leaning crew there. I don't feel like they put politics front and center. It's just more about like outdoorsy stuff. But maybe they do, especially on the podcast. I couldn't say I haven't listened, but it does seem like that's part of that brand.
We can agree, though, this is a Rubicon too far with bread and circuses. This is dystopian. It does sound like, based on the recent conversations with the Senate, that this is not going forward. The more speculative or perhaps cynical of us in the crowd tonight will consider the possibility that this was floated as a test balloon to see how America would react. And then when they didn't get a positive reaction, they said, no one talked about that ever.
Right. Seems like sort of part of the playbook is the floating, move or the testing of boundaries.
Right.
It does seem to be very much part of what they're up to.
The old Gish Gallop, right? There are
The Running Man, another good example.
Yes. Shout out Stephen King via his pseudonym. Also, this makes me think of, again, as we accelerate toward an increasingly surreal civilization and society, it makes me think of how many other things might become something like reality shows. If you had told us when we began this strange endeavor, those years ago, that we would be in the current situation, I don't know if we still would have done the show. But here we are. UnitedHealth investors, by the way, just sued the company UnitedHealth over its response to the murder of their former CEO, Brian Thompson.
Because of its effects on like the stock price? Or are they saying they're not being good stewards of their, their board? Or I'm curious.
Yeah, let's go to CBS News. Kiara Frazier says, reporting here, this proposed class action lawsuit that was filed recently in the Southern District of New York is led by one of the investors in United Healthcare, Roberto Fowler, and the suit alleges that UnitedHealth artificially inflated prices when the company initially forecast their earnings per share in December. And this is strange because, look, the reason they're suing or taking legal action is that UnitedHealth originally said the earnings per share are going to be $29.50, maybe as high as $30. That's what they said in December. They said it again in January, despite the backlash of stuff we were talking about in our Eva Core episode or Evil Core episode. And then the investors decided to sue because UnitedHealth cut its 2025 forecast to a lower range. Not that much lower, but I guess it matters when you have hundreds and hundreds of shares. They said now the earning per share is going to be between $26 to $26.50. So this company's own investors are suing it at this point.
That's nuts.
Not a good look.
I don't know. I mean, how often does that happen? Are the investors trying to get on the right side of history? They also talk about aggressive anti-consumer tactics in their suit.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess I thought of it more as a bottom line kind of move. Like I know that you can certainly remove stockholders of a certain level, like have the ability to like vote. They have some level of control they can exercise, and they could potentially, petition, I guess, to have an executive removed for like failure to be a good steward of the stock, right?
Sure.
But this is different than that, yeah?
Yeah, it feels like this is, okay, it feels like obviously there is an issue with projected profits, which always comes up with shareholders and with investors, but it is inextricable from the context of that earlier murder, right? The murder for which Luigi Mangione remains incarcerated today, although he has not been convicted in court.
Yeah, it's an interesting sign of the times, I guess, right? I don't know.
Yeah, and you got to wonder where that's going. Speaking of class action lawsuits, 23andMe has entered the chat. We talked about this at length in the past in some strange news, in some listener mail, in some episodes. We also learned recently that 23andMe went bankrupt, so they are out searching for a suitor. Yet they have found true love in corporate terms. A company named Regeneron is going to buy 23andMe for $256 million.
They should get together with Evil Corps. They say Regeneron. Evil Corps.
These guys sound more and more like Captain Planet villains. You know what I
agree.
mean? Here's the quick scoop. Let's go to Reuters and CNN, who are noting that Regeneron Pharmaceuticals, which itself is a drug maker, it's not just a venture capital outfit. They are buying 23andMe through a bankruptcy auction, and they've already come forward in various public statements and said, "Look, 23andMe customers, we are going to abide by the existing privacy policies that 23andMe created, and we're going to comply with applicable laws regarding consumer data," which gets tricky because those laws change country to country and indeed state to state. I don't know. They're getting pretty much everything from 23andMe except for a telehealth service they have called Lemonade Health. And I think the plan is to sunset that one, but I'd never heard of Lemonade Health.
No.
Also, it's spelled AID. Get it? Lemonade.
Okay. Yeah, let's make lemons into lemonade.
Are you a lemon? Maybe we can aid you.
We can aid you because you got a bad ticker.
Is this the lemon equivalent of help, of support? Lemonade.
Bad help.
Yeah, exactly. The reason we're mentioning this is because for many of us in the audience who may have played with 23andMe or other consumer DNA genetic info companies, your next immediate question may be, how do I get control of my data? How do I remove it from the system? How do I ensure that I feel safe and protected? To do that, you're going to want to get some advice straight from the New York Times Wirecutter. They've got a bonus episode on how to delete your data from 23andMe. And reports on the ground, we'll walk you through this in a second, but reports on the ground, just so you know, folks, are showing us that getting that data removed is a little more tricky than the company may imply. It's kind of like anybody who's ever had a gym membership that was really tricky to get out of. Has that ever happened to you guys?
I haven't dealt with it yet, but I am a little gym membership rich right now, and I need to dump one. And so I'm looking forward to that bureaucracy.
Right. Yeah, just stay on your P's and Q's, cross the T's, dot the I's. To delete your 23andMe data, says Wirecutter, all you have to do is log into your account, go to settings, select 23andMe data, which is way down at the bottom of the page, then hit view, download a copy of it, then select delete data, then permanently delete data. You can also opt to have the genetic material you submitted destroyed. And then you have to go to the research and product consents section to remove permission to allow your material to be used for other stuff. Note that doing this only revokes their ability to use your material in future research. So everything that has already been done with whatever you gave 23andMe, that's still there. That's going to be a real thing going forward. I don't know whether I'm making a mountain out of a molehill here, but it does feel like this is important information for a lot of our listeners. What do you guys think?
Well, it's certainly something we've been talking about, and this seems like a natural escalation of a lot of the privacy issues that we've discussed kind of ad nauseum on the show.
Yeah, agreed. We don't know. It's not that we're accusing these companies of participating in insidious, nefarious, or conspiratorial things, but we simply do not know what will happen with that information. So if you have a concern about that, and again, in full transparency, we worked with 23andMe in the past. If you have a personal concern, then now is the time to go in and, sort of get your head around what may be happening and the implications. Last story here before we move on to the next part of our weekly Strange News segment. There was, speaking of conspiracies, a secret deal between members of Mexican cartels and the United States government. This deal allowed cartel family members to enter the United States. This is not coming to us from internet gossip and rumor. This is coming from the security chief of Mexico. Thanks to our friends at the AP, just last week, Mexican authorities confirmed that 17 family members of various cartel leaders crossed into the United States. It was part of a deal between a son of the former head of the Sinaloa cartel and the Trump administration. Gonna be honest, Mexico is pissed.
Well, it also doesn't, it kind of flies in the face of the Trump administration's whole shutting down the cartels, their whole narrative about the closed borders. It's all kind of using the cartels as the main impetus for stuff like that, all the fentanyl being trafficked across the border and things like that. So it does feel a little bit, maybe a lot hypocrite.
It's a little, it's counterintuitive, is it not?
Well, that too. Yeah.
What is the end goal? Yeah.
Well, the guy's functioning as an informant, right?
That's the idea, but they haven't. If that is the idea. However, Mexican prosecutors say that the current administration has shared no information about this.
Oh,
why is it so public too? That doesn't seem like a very good tactic for an informant.
Right. It came from an independent journalist that we need to shout out, Luis Chaparro.
Well, I'll tell you why, guys. It's because they're worried about the little corruption thing going on between government officials and cartels in Mexico, right? So if they shared all that information, there would be an early warning likely to cartel members and the people that he's informing.
Yeah. So I think it's not necessarily, I don't know. We can't jump to conclusions as we don't have enough information just yet.
Just really quickly, Ben, I just wanted to add, I know I jumped immediately to it's a payoff thing, it's hypocritical, et cetera. I guess it just makes me think of this whole notion of the gold card, of this idea of paying a bunch of money to get citizenship, et cetera, that the administration floated, and how, if you have enough money, you can get into the country. And there was a lot of talk about how, well, who are the people that are going to maybe use that? It would be cartel leaders with lots of money to potentially try to take advantage of a program.
Yeah, but God, I hear you. But God, who would not want a couple of investor passports? I regularly go through the countries that offer that. And I'll tell you, some of them are more affordable than you might assume. It's like
a temporary visa that you get
full citizenship.
No.
You give them that
because of your ability to invest, because of your ability to do business.
You jump in front of the line, just like you have a Disney Fast Pass or something. But the ride is, legal residency in a country. Yes, we have much more to get to. We would love to hear your thoughts regarding all of these stories. We're going to pause for a word from our sponsors, but folks, spoiler, listen to the very end of tonight's program because we're also going to give you a guide to locating spies. That's the spoiler. That's the foreshadowing. We'll be right back.
And we're back, and I'm going to jump right in with, I'm going to do the bummer story up front. Well, it's not inherently a bummer. We've certainly done episodes in the past about the idea of assisted suicide. I'm not going to say unaliving. That's what it was historically referred to as. Right. I'm going to use those terms for the sake of this discussion. and a lot of the issues behind it in terms of people that are against things like that typically come from a place of religiousness, typically come from a place of the sanctity of life, maybe similar arguments to people who might be anti-abortion. And there are a handful of states in the United States that I believe have this available, as a legal option, which certainly no one needs as a legal option, but there is something to be said of a humane, overseen option for ending one's life, not because you're depressed, because you have a terminal illness, because you have something that is determined to be irreversible and you're suffering and you are living in a state of pain and anxiety. And this is a way of kind of helping put agency into the hands of people going through things like that and not having to take matters, say, into their own hands, which we also hear very sad stories about often, people doing that themselves behind closed doors. Whereas in this situation, it's almost like you could be surrounded by family. Like it could be a conversation that you're having with your loved ones and they can all be there potentially. So New York State has made some strides towards this as well. And it is the New York legislature that has passed a bill called the Medical Aid in Dying Measure, or rather, I guess it's a bill, which passed 81 to 67 after 4 hours of debate in the New York State legislature. This is coming from Gothamist article that is attributed to, Jimmy Valkind, saying that the Medical Aid in Dying Measure passed 81 to 67 after more than 4 hours debate, with more than 10 Democrats joining the minority Republicans in voting no. So it would appear that it is not entirely a down the aisle, kind of split issue. It's still unclear, the article says, whether it will be considered by the state Senate or whether Governor Kathy Hochul supports it. 10 other states allow similar practices, including Oregon, which legalized medically assisted suicide in 1997. Folks that are in support of this, like I had mentioned, which is my perspective, say this is a compassionate choice for folks who are in pain at the end of their lives, advocating making this a safe is sort of a, I guess, loaded term here, or maybe doesn't really apply, but a humane process involving oversight from physicians with terminally ill individuals such as cancer patients, as well as folks whose spouses and siblings have also suffered, in some of these final moments. So one of the sponsors of the bill, Amy Paulin, who's a Democrat from Westchester County, said, "The lasting memory I have of my sister is shouting in pain. She might have chosen this or not, but she would have had a choice." And then on the other side of it, we have some folks commenting from, I guess, the state's Roman Catholic bishops organization. So Robert Bellafiore, who's a spokesperson for the New York State Catholic Conference, said this was referring to this in, I believe, pretty hyperbolic way as state-sanctioned suicide. Guys, what do you think about that term sanctioned?
Well,
I feel like it's weaponized so much, and especially in this situation. They're not saying you should do this.
Yeah.
We're forcing you to do this. Right.
But it's like, why here in the West, in the U.S. especially, you never hear state-sanctioned as a modifier to something good. No one's ever like, oh, I've got to go to the state-sanctioned library.
It implies government overreach.
Read some free books. Yeah. It's always like state-sanctioned death squads or suicide.
Death panels,
and,
exactly.
Noel, this reminds me of, obviously the shadow of Kevorkian, but it also reminds me of the Sarcopod, street name, the suicide pod, the euthanasia device that came out a while back. It was invented by a guy named Philip Nietzsche, and it also, like Kevorkian's work, it ruffled a lot of feathers on a very sensitive topic, but there's some things to unpack. First, logically, if you believe in bodily autonomy, then your idea must be that if someone is not harming someone else with their actions, they should be able to do what they want with their person, habeas corpus and all that. However, it feels like there does need to be some nuanced legislation, because it reminds me of those studies that show people who attempt suicide by, say, jumping off a bridge. The vast majority of folks who survive that attempt regret doing it. Right. Absolutely. So terminal illness feels like a very, very much a mission critical qualifier. But we also have to remember there are a lot of people who are going through very difficult times in their lives and may impulsively wish for self-harm only to regret it.
That's right.
Regret it later. So how would we square a person's right to autonomy with, like, I guess you have to make the barrier of entry pretty high at this point.
I'll tell you how, 100%, Ben. Those are all really great points. And the opposition coming from the New York State Catholic Conference sort of addresses some of these things, saying it tells young people who everyone knows are in the midst of an unprecedented mental health crisis that life is disposable and that it's okay to end your life if you see no hope. It turns medicine on its head from a healing profession into a killing one. Again, I find this to be incredibly hyperbolic and sort of weaponized language.
Loaded,
sort of,
yeah, for sure.
Loaded, missing the point, which is addressed in the bill itself, which requires 2 physicians to certify that a patient has an irreversible, incurable illness or condition with a prognosis of 6 months or less to live. 2 witnesses who aren't related to the patient, aren't in line for any inheritance, and don't work for a nursing home where a patient receives care also have to sign as witnesses to the patient's written request. So it feels to me like that's a pretty high barrier to entry. You know, to your point, Ben.
Yeah, I hear you, Ben.
Yeah, and advocates go on to say that it's all about the patient's control and that there is that level, you know, pretty strict level of oversight. There is this concept of coercion that comes up a lot, like this idea of potentially nursing home staff. Yeah,
you know, especially like if someone's compromised in their faculties.
Right. That's right. Yeah, and so it does feel like there are reasonable measures in place to prevent that. But I do feel like that term coercion that comes up a lot is also often a little bit loaded. The idea of, and it just seems to me like nobody. Okay, let's talk about the conspiratorial angle a little bit. I think it's an elephant in the room. Like it doesn't particularly benefit big pharma and the healthcare industry if people have the choice to end their own lives, because
I didn't know.
There's a lot of money to be made in end of life care. I'm just saying.
Sure.
So. Yeah, discuss.
There's a lot of industry tied to it.
That's right.
I just had, sorry, I'm being quiet on this part, guys. I literally just had a conversation this morning with my son's mother about a family member of hers that just went into hospice and is, you know, on her way out. And it's one of those things when there's a lot of pain, there is a discussion with that person, you know, like, that potentially they might want to just have it be over. That would be really great if it could just be over. But nobody wants that. And then also being in someone's shoes who is not cognitively there, how do you have that discussion with them? And it is such I'm just putting this out here to say it is such a complicated situation, right? At any time somebody is trying to choose, or a family is trying to choose if it's time to let someone go.
Agreed. I don't say much personal stuff on this show, but I completely understand what you're saying, Matt. One of my grandmothers, many years ago, that was the last conversation we had with her, and she wasn't all there. So there's not really a clean answer to a lot of these things.
Certainly not. But it's also interesting how, you know, my mother passing, I had to make the choice to end her life. And it was paperwork that was laid out and gave me that right. And I was advised by the doctors that there was no coming back from the state that she was in, and she was intubated, and there were all these factors and boxes that had to be checked, and that you know, her lungs were full of fluid. It just wasn't. It wasn't any coming back, and that's what I was advised, and that is what I did. But I don't see how. Like, why do you have to get to such a place?
Yeah.
Before that conversation happens, is what I'm saying.
I had this own thought in my head the other day, and I think that is almost a point against the conspiratorial fact, right? Because those are medical professionals talking to you, Noel, and saying
that is true. That is true.
We could do this. We could sustain her life for however long you want, and then the medical bills would just pile and pile and pile and pile. Or we can do this, which is theoretically the mission of all medical professionals, right? When you go into that field,
do no harm.
Exactly. Right. So
it is interesting, though, how do no harm and the way this language is weaponized kind of conflicts with the idea of ending someone's life. But sometimes that is the humane thing to do, and that is a form of doing no harm, because you're doing more harm by letting an individual live in a substandard, dare we even say, hellish state.
Oof.
It's a lot, guys. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to get personal about it, but it is something that you know, I do feel connected with, and it's interesting, and it's a very complex thing. But I do think people should have the right to do something like this, and you know, because also, I mean, I had another family friend who had terminal cancer, and took his own life with a weapon. That's a very violent death. That's a violent way to go.
Yeah.
And you're alone and terror. I mean, can you imagine someone's state of mind in that situation?
But that's the way it goes now. If you live in a place that does not allow for some way to end your life, peacefully, then you take it if you're in that position and you make that decision, right? And that's a reality, I guess, that we're all kind of facing. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely complex. I'll leave that one there. Maybe I should have led with the weird mystery Birdpocalypse story instead of that one. But I guess maybe it's also just ripping the Band-Aid off. In California, in a town not too far from San Francisco in the Bay Area called Richmond, residents are reporting sightings of exploding birds and just a rash of dead birds falling from the sky, some of which are appearing to explode in midair. There's security camera footage. There's Ring camera footage. Residents have said they've found as many as 50 dead birds in the area over the last few months. And this was initially reported by ABC7 there in the Bay Area. I'm pulling a lot of this from a Guardian article. California town investigates mystery of exploding dead birds. There are theories, y'all. A lot of people are pointing fingers at the power company because a lot of these birds apparently have been, like birds want to do, sit on these power lines. Officials for the California Department of Fish and Wildlife told The Guardian that the Department of Wildlife's health lab received 2 dead birds for evaluation that had been collected by the utility company Pacific Gas and Electric. One of the birds was a mourning dove and another a European starling. So these are like migratory birds. The lab found no signs of electrocution, however, in these collected birds, but the creatures did show injuries that could have been caused by a pellet gun, a BB gun, or a slingshot. They said in a statement, the exact cause of the trauma to all of these birds could not be determined. The investigation came as some neighbors blame Pacific Gas and Electric for faulty cable lines and urged the utility to take a look into the incident. Spokesperson from PG&E, who also, again, led the autopsy kind of charge there, seemingly maybe in a way of exonerating themselves, but, whatever. We appreciate the concern of our customers in Richmond about the recent series of bird deaths. PG&E does not believe that there was an issue with our electrical equipment and agrees that these birds were not electrocuted. So there you go. It is being described as a very traumatic and violent thing to witness. A local resident named Maximilian Bowling told ABC7. So when they land and it happens, they just quickly explode and it's really violent. It's very traumatic, super traumatic to see this. I've got my bird issues, guys, but I don't wish them this kind of ill. This is a horrible thing to happen to birds. We must get to the bottom of what's happening to these birds. There is another piece in the LA Times. The mystery of Northern California's exploding birds is being solved. And that was from May the 14th. And I believe it mainly refers to the autopsy that PG&E has performed. Let's see. It does show that they weren't electrocuted. So I wonder what's next. Further, it shows that they weren't electrocuted is what but again, I'm a little suspicious because it's 2 birds, a mourning dove and a European starling, and it's the power company themselves that conducted these tests. And they're the ones saying, no, it's cool. See, we checked it out.
It's a cat with a gun.
Cat.
Long range.
Can you imagine?
High caliber.
So it really is a mini Birdpocalypse, y'all. Yeah. Oh, wow. That's a terrifying image. Cats are the scourge of the bird world. That's why they say if you let your cats outside, put a bell on them, not for you finding the cat, but to give the birds a fighting chance.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
This is really puzzling. I don't know. How would it, just theoretically, how would it be an electrical problem? Like the shielding isn't correct on some of the power lines?
It would have to be like ungrounded, right? It would be, to cause that level of violent explosion, there would have to be significant grounding problem that would also be very dangerous for humans potentially, some sort of serious flaw.
Yeah, I don't know.
And apparently, y'all, there is something called, or a safeguard or a company that creates standards in place called the Avian Powerline Interaction Committee. And there is apparently a standard that is to be complied with for avian safety around power lines. And another spokesperson, Matt Neumann from PG&E, said the pole at issue is compliant with avian safe guidelines. So it's a good question. Ben, you got any theories? Think there's like a Dennis the Menace type figure, exploding birds, an anti-bird vigilante? I like your cat with a gun theory. That's a good image.
Yeah, cat with a gun is probably the most plausible thing. Group of
I
cats,
think you're right.
maybe cartel related.
Ooh,
cat
militia.
cartel.
There you go. Well, let's stop here for now. I think I've run over on time a little bit, but let's take a quick break, hear a word from our sponsor, and then we'll come back with a little bit more strange news from Mr. Matty Freds.
And we've returned. Do we all remember the cybersecurity company CrowdStrike? Do you guys remember talking about them?
Mm-hmm.
Last year, the company was responsible for a massive global server outage. They pushed out an update, had some issues with it, to its software that's used by a lot of people. When they put out that software, which is designed to detect cybersecurity threats, it brought down 8.5 million Windows systems across the globe.
Whoa.
Well, that outage, as is stated here by The Guardian, that we will talk about in just a moment, it caused chaos at airports, took down computers in hospitals, which is not great, TV networks, payment systems, and personal computers even. Well, guys, they just announced earlier in May that they are going to cut 5% of their workforce because guess what they're putting in instead of humans?
Oh gosh, is it cats with guns?
Yes.
I think that would probably be preferable.
Yeah.
They have some intuition. It's AI, isn't it?
Nope. It's Chuck Testa.
Who's that?
He's a taxidermy badass. You should look him up.
What?
Chuck Testa.
Mhm.
Anyway.
I didn't know there were badasses in the field of
He's
taxidermy.
kind of the LeBron of taxidermy,
Wow. I learned something today, y'all.
No, it's AI, guys.
which is also just a fraudulent term and often misused. I'm going to be a broken record every time that comes up.
No, you're right, Ben. But much like, unaliving versus like assisted suicide or something, it is the term that is being thrown around. But you're right. I think it is worth that qualifier nearly every time. Because it is. Yeah.
I appreciate that, Noel. So CrowdStrike then joins multiple other tech companies and also companies in other spaces like Duolingo. Being another recent example. It's funny.
Oh, yeah, my kid said Duolingo was canceled because they're using all AI.
Right.
So that generation is even keyed in on this, and they don't like it.
No, why would they? Also, one of the more interesting conversations that's going to come up in the near to mid future is going to be what happens when you replace C-suite level decisions with a large language model or some kind of AI.
We got computer
That'll be the last
CEOs.
thing to
Computer CEOs. Well, hey, the CEO of CrowdStrike.
Yeah.
Who is a human being?
George
So far.
Kurtz.
Thus far.
George
Okay,
Kurtz.
cool.
Technically,
Kurtz.
physiologically, yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. We talked about, no offense, CEOs, if you're out there listening, but
Human is a relative term.
There is a higher chance that you may exhibit some sociopathic, psychopathic things, but it's fine, just due to the nature of the success you've had in the businesses you've run. Anyway, but that's fine. Yeah, George Kurtz, human being, chief executive of CrowdStrike, said that it's about 500 positions, or 5% of its workforce. It's going to be cut globally, and it is due to not just AI, but AI efficiencies that are being created right now, which, as you said, Ben, all the companies are attempting to find ways to do this. Make it a little more efficient, save a little bit more money, and then everybody's feeling good on the investor side, which is really what it's all about.
Until the next year, when there's a new profit target.
Yes.
Goalposts between goalposts. Yes.
Exactly. The old quarters. You can read this in The Guardian. It was posted May 9th, 2025. Title is Tone Deaf U.S. Company Responsible for Global IT Outage to Cut Jobs and Use AI. And just a heads up, everything I'm going to be talking about comes from like late April, early May. It's stuff that kind of fell through the cracks on my end, at least, where I'd written down that we should talk about this and then I totally forgot. But that's one. There are several people in that article just citing, hey, why not take that 5% and put them into like an emergency team, turn that 5% of workforce into an emergency team that handles stuff like when 8.5 million machines go down because your software is screwed up, or maybe a QA team that looks at updates before your updates come out.
Some sort of thing that could strike a crowd of problems.
Like 500 strong.
CrowdStrike, doesn't that sound like a full party move in a JRPG? Like
It
initiate
really
CrowdStrike.
does. It really does. I was thinking about
yeah.
those names. A lot of the big companies have these. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being pretentious, but they sound. They don't sound like what they do.
Yeah,
is the issue.
Yeah. Well, hey, but in a victory for the people who are losing their jobs, the company expects to incur up to $53 million in costs as a result of the cuts. And we're assuming that's severance packages. That's why I say it's
Sure.
it's at least they're going to get a nice severance, hopefully.
Well, yeah. And then you also, I mean, instead of paying out into the privatized insurance system for human employees, that cost gets replaced by maintenance for servers. That's their insurance.
What CrowdStrike needs to do is come up with some kind of healthcare system for the AI supercomputer systems.
It's funny you say that, Matt, because I was having a conversation with a friend offline. Do you guys ever accidentally reinvent something? Like I was saying, you know, what would be really smart. There's a 3-year time window right now because we were talking about increasingly monopolistic telecom and cable services. And how, you know, if you have enough streaming services that all want to be their own precious little boys, altogether you're basically paying a cable bill. So my pitch was,
a million
right?
percent.
So my pitch
more
was,
so.
Yeah, my pitch was, let's get a third party middleman character, and it will negotiate with these streaming services to get price breaks at scale, so a lower cost for the end user. And then I realized I had accidentally reinvented what cable was in the beginning. Yeah,
totally.
So
because remember when you had to get packages back in the day for like the different, ESPN or whatever. That was the premium.
And you always had to accept. You had to take an L on a couple of channels that you didn't want.
Yeah,
right? Like ESPN 14 or whatever.
Or there are a lot in those packages.
There were so many.
Is it just a matter of now under the new model that the individual networks are just getting the revenue directly?
Yeah.
And that's better for the networks? Yeah, okay. That's what I
thought. In related news, Charter Communications is acquiring Cox Communications.
That's exactly what informed the conversation.
$34.5 billion.
That's the monopolization I'm talking about.
$1 million. Oh my God. Those are the ones I remember from my youth.
Why?
Cox and they also own tons of radio stations.
You guys, to quote Idiocracy, I like money.
Well,
yeah, money's great.
The cable companies have just become internet service providers.
Yeah,
like
think of it's a reshuffling of the deck. That's all it is. You're absolutely right, dude.
I know this is not in scope of the story we're discussing, but I think it does speak to the larger trends at play because, of course, CrowdStrike, yes, fumbled the bag hard on that IT outage, but they are not unique in seeking to leverage various forms of automation. And the problem then, as we often explored in years past, we were weirdly prescient with this. The problem then becomes that before you reach that halcyon post-work economy that informs Star Trek, you have a post-worker economy. So the question then, and they have to ask this, please be rational actors, CEOs, and decision makers. What use is having a streamlined majority automated company making products if the people can't buy the products because everybody got fired? You know what I mean? We found the fastest way to make the coolest car, but no one can afford gas because we fired all the people who worked at the factory.
Crap. Crap.
It is sort of, it's indicative of that general short-sightedness around like move fast and break stuff mentality.
Sure.
Right? It's like you basically move fast and break stuff to the point where you don't have any consumers anymore. Or I don't know. It's
at some point you're just breaking.
That's exactly. Thank you, man. That's right.
Live fast, die young, guys.
Just die.
All right. So I don't know. We got to move on. I'm so sorry, guys. But we talked pretty recently, I think earlier this year, maybe even late last year, about a little company called Bayer. Bayer. You might remember them from your aspirin. Well, we talked about them because they're doing an intense public relations, lobbying, and legal campaign, and it has to do with this little thing that they acquired fairly recently, in the span of the company's history at least, this thing called Roundup that they acquired when they bought Monsanto.
Yeah, heard of it. That was the last thing we talked about Bayer.
Yes.
Regarding.
Yeah.
And I think I didn't even realize how diversified they were.
It's like
in terms
Unilever,
of like,
man.
Yeah,
It's
100%.
It's another
or
monopolistic
DuPont.
gestalt.
3M. Yeah.
Yeah, 3M's a good example too.
Yep. And the campaign is all about Roundup, or Roundup ready products, Roundup, the actual chemical that is an herbicide, and it's all about whether or not. Actually, no, it's all about the fact, they say, that Roundup is safe for use and it definitely doesn't cause cancer. And if it did cause cancer, it's not their fault.
Like the narcissist prayer.
Oh, a little bit. Well, guys, they just had a massive victory here in our state of Georgia because we have become the second state to pass legislation that shields Bayer and, Roundup and Monsanto and all that stuff from any lawsuits that claim that Bayer itself failed to warn customers about the potential dangers of using the herbicide Roundup.
Right.
So,
and this goes back to the wildly differing opinions from European authorities and U.S. authorities. The EPA.
And European authorities tend to be a little more conservative about these types of things.
Yeah.
Like literally in the favor of the human.
A little more
typically.
protective of
That's
the
the word. Thank
concept
you.
of healthy humans. And I guess we should also note that Bayer, being a global corporation, is not headquartered in the U.S., right?
no, they are in Germany, which changes things a little bit legally. And it is so interesting that, a company based in another country can spend so much money on public relations and lobbying here and all kinds of stuff. But again, it just makes you think about the system, that the way that thing's supposed to go. But at the state level, I don't know, it hits a little different to me. Just thinking about, governors of different states being influenced so much, and then the actual legislators of each individual state being lobbied as hard as the folks are in Washington, D.C. It's a bit weird. What insights do you find there, Ben, with it being based in Germany?
Well, I think it's stuff that you, Noel, and I have talked about in the past, right? You already nailed it, Matt. The tricky patchwork legislation in the United States, especially for corporate entities of this size. Action taken in the U.S. might just hit, I don't know, their U.S. subsidiary. Like, I don't think anybody is going to fly over to Germany and slap handcuffs on the C-suite of Bayer.
Yeah, agreed.
Also, Bayer didn't invent Roundup, right?
Nope.
They bought the company. So it's kind of like,
That's right.
If you buy a used car that was involved in car accidents, that's not a perfect analogy, because in this analogy, the car you buy is still hurting people.
Well, yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, yeah, it should be noted that they acquired, I think it was 2018 when Bayer acquired Monsanto, which is, when they took on all the legal responsibilities, right? All of the, I don't know, they bought the car that had some serious legal issues. There was you remember when we talked about this last, there was a $2.1 billion award to a single human being who alleged Roundup caused his cancer.
And a lot of it went to his legal team, just to be clear.
Oh, yeah.
That is how it goes. Yeah.
But because he made a pretty solid case that glyphosate, how do you say it?
I think that's it. Glyphosate.
Ah, yes. Glyphosate. You know it. Various courts have agreed it is carcinogenic, despite the EPA here in the U.S. disagreeing.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I do want to say, too, because I kind of jumped in to be like, oh, Europe and their focus on human rights and the, the safety of their citizens. That does not preclude them from having evil corporations. I just want to make that clear.
Come on.
And I just finished it, guys. And I'm pretty sure, Ben, you've seen it. Matt, I don't remember if we've talked about this, but the show Common Side Effects on Adult Swim is about this very thing. The idea of like how evil corporations would keep people from having, cures. They keep wanting to keep people sick, et cetera. But it is taken to the most extreme and psychedelic degree. It's a really great show.
Selling
about a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, not a cure.
Thank you.
Solve a symptom, not a condition.
That's right. That's exactly it.
Oh, that's so
and
amazing.
a way where they could even take something that might be a cure and let's nerf it a little bit. You know what I mean? We don't want to give them the whole thing.
Right.
Let's get a quote from Brian Neighbor, president of Bayer's Crop Sciences in both North America, Australia, and New Zealand.
It's not spelled neighbor the way it should be, though, folks. That would be too cool of a name. It's N-A-B-E-R. Sorry, Brian. You got so close, man.
Well, he says that this new law, quote, demonstrates that Georgia stands with its farmers who work tirelessly to produce safe and affordable food. We agree. We're on the side of humble farmer all day long. We get it.
Oh, you hear Rebel Moon got canned? No more Rebel Moon. No more humble farmer. They're not. They gave up on it. Sorry.
It'll come back with the power of belief.
We'll keep the humble farmer mythos alive on this show alone.
We have, yes.
Once Netflix gets acquired by Charter again, it'll come back for another season.
And then they all get bought by Unilever.
Yeah.
And then all programs become about soap.
Yes. And of course, ultimately, this is great for the consumer. Matt, I'd love to hear a little bit more. And then we're going to play not quite devil's advocate, but I suggest we walk through some knock-on context that a lot of people aren't thinking about when they hear these, infuriating reports.
Well, let's jump to it. I tell me.
Okay, so Brian says that, this is a move to show that Georgia, which is an agricultural state, supports the people growing food, right, and produce. That is the public statement. Critics will say, you are not protecting farmers, or humble farmers, you are protecting large corporate interests. However, the piece of the puzzle that doesn't get reported as often is the accelerating deterioration of arable land. There is a world very much on the horizon, and some of us in the crowd listening tonight are going to be alive to see it. There is a world wherein humanity will need incredibly a rollout of much more sophisticated farming methods. And a lot of the traditional methods simply aren't going to work where they work today. So you can make an argument that if not now, here in the near future, companies will say they need these pesticides just to create basic food, not even the fancy stuff.
Well, yeah, they're protecting Roundup ready crops, which is a whole other episode that we did way back in the day.
Terminal seed lines.
Well, yeah, because back in the day, in the 90s, 96 to be exact, Roundup at Monsanto, using their Roundup herbicide, created genetically modified crops like soybeans, corn, sugar beets, cotton, alfalfa, that were genetically modified to be resistant to Roundup, so you could just douse those babies in Roundup, and they're not going to die, but all the other things that grow in the soil will die. All the bad stuff that you don't want.
Right. And Monsanto would crack down hard on anybody who happened to have an adjacent farm wherein seeds or, some part of that substance transmitted to their land. And Monsanto would accuse them of IP theft and things like that. Also, terminal seed lines. Ooh, insidious. Talking about, to Noel's earlier point about selling a service rather than a cure.
Yeah, you got to buy the seeds for that crop, and then you got to buy more seeds for the next crop. You can't take seeds out of what you're pulling out of the ground because they don't do that no more. Now you got to just continually buy in this weird subscription model all your crops from Monsanto / now Bayer. So that's really what we're talking about here.
I also will argue or posit, I don't want it to be an argument, folks. I will also posit that there is a great deal of efficiency and wisdom to be learned from older indigenous farming techniques. And they could be the answers.
Rotation, right? Things like that.
Sure, like the Three Sisters and so on. There could be answers in that old technology that are being ignored, perhaps because of path dependency on the part of big agriculture. But it is a problem humanity is going to have to wrestle with. Things aren't going to get serious as not even the race for clean water escalates, but as the race for arable land escalates. Everybody buy MREs. make sure to change your MREs out when the expiration date hits. The good thing about
You're gonna
MREs,
get sponsored by MREs, man.
even after here's the brilliant thing about MREs though, guys, even after the expiration date, you can usually eat them because the secret is they never start off good.
They just get worse over time.
Well, yeah, I mean, I just had that conversation here. I had a bunch of giant cans of things as like an emergency if there's just a tornado or something, whatever, just to have
I
around.
thought it was smart.
Well, I got those back in 2021, 2022, and the canned foods just went bad. So it was a discussion of, well, how do we actually, because the food isn't bad in these yet. They're still good to go. They're sealed in that can, baby.
Right.
Do we just keep them around? Do we just get some new ones? I don't know. What's the deal? What do we do? Can we donate them? And I found out a lot of food shelters and food banks will receive, especially a larger can of food that is expired, as long as it's within a certain time period after expiration, because the food is still viable. Yeah. It's still good to go.
A lot of those are sell-by dates. I mean, even like on like non-canned stuff, you can usually, I'm not, giving medical advice here, like, err on the side of a couple weeks past it at the very least. It's just about selling.
This is official medical advice from Dr. Noel Brown. Please, if you have...
Eat that month-old yogurt. It's fine.
If you have any issues, please, of course, don't hesitate to reach out to our complaint department, Jonathan Strickland at iHeartMedia.com, 24 hours a night, 7 nights a week. I'd love to hear from you and really walk them through it.
Oh, yeah. Step by step. Step by step. How does that song go?
Step by step.
That's it.
Day by day.
Yeah.
It's not quite as good as the Perfect Strangers theme song, but it's
dude, don't even get me started. We love that one. We so love that one.
On the wings of our dreams.
Wow.
Yes, it's very good.
It's
amazing,
so good.
guys.
It's so much better than the actual show. But that's how sitcoms went back then. And we have, I think, mutually a lot we did not get to yet, some of which may have to occur at a later date.
Yeah, we don't have time for a few of these stories. We'll bring them back next time. One in particular. The second one, guys, I think we have to do a full update episode, like a proper episode on Virginia Joffrey, who recently, at least according to reports, and her family took her own life. Although there are other members of her family who say she did not. So I'm afraid we're having a bit of a situation within the Jeffrey Epstein saga of another person who has taken their own life, and there are a lot of questions around it. So,
great,
sorted.
We've got other episodes coming up. We have to cover that one. I think we should also do an update on the JFK recent declassifications, and then I hit you guys up off air. Do you think pheromones work on people?
They work on me, baby.
My pheromones are powerful.
Your musk is strong, Matt. I've always said that. You got a strong man musk.
And we want to hear from you folks on all these and other stories. We might also...
What do you think of Matt's man?
We also might have
write in about that.
Abercrombie and Fitch episode on the way. In the meantime, we can't thank you enough for tuning in. We also want to thank our super producers, Triforce and the Tennessee Pal, and we would love to hear from you. You can call us on the phone. You can meet us on the social medias, should thou sip, and you can give us a good old-fashioned email. But hey, you're already on the internet until that CME hits, so why not find us there?
That's right. You can find us at the handle Conspiracy Stuff, where we exist on Facebook with our Facebook group. Here's where it gets crazy on YouTube, where we have video content galore for your perusing enjoyment, and on X, FKA, Twitter. On Instagram and TikTok, we're Conspiracy Stuff Show.
Guys, quick interlude here. Ben, on the CME tip, did you see the news about the X-class solar flares that actually took out communications in parts of the world? It just happened. Like solar flares, though, not even CMEs, flares that did it. Yikes. Okay.
Yikes indeed. Holy shnikes.
Okay. Our phone number is 1-833-STDWYTK. When you call in, it's a 3-minute voicemail. Leave your name, a cool nickname if you wish, and let us know within the message if we can use your name and message on the air. If you want to reach out with us via textings of some sort, why not instead send us an email? We are
the entities that read every piece of correspondence we receive. Be well aware, yet unafraid. Sometimes the void writes back. If you listened to the end, here is the thing we teased. It's an excellent read, and we hope that it does not help you in your day-to-day life, but if it does, good luck. Have you ever thought, is that a hiker or a vagrant or a spy? Well, Latvia is very worried about that, and in their recent threat assessment, their Defense Intelligence and Security Service gave the public pointers on how to identify or how to differentiate between a scraggly little scamp and a spy in disguise. So shout out to Eve Sampson, writing for the New York Times. We'd love to hear other stories that capture your fancy or your curiosity or your interest. Conspiracy at iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.